This comes to us, again, via email from Amanda, Zach, and Mark. It's okay if you guys don't remember their names, so I'm sure one of them will let it go. In the last general federal election, the NDP received 1.1 million more votes than the Bloc Québécois, but won 13 fewer seats, while the Green Party attracted 940,000 votes compared to the Bloc's 1.4 million, but got 0 seats. Meanwhile, none of those parties have a Senate seat. We would like to know each candidate's view on the current electoral system and is reform needed towards proportional representation. We'll start with Mr. Burrows.
Well, thank you, multiple sources. Too many names to remember, I'm sure. Excellent question. It's one that has been talked about in Canada for quite a number of years. It's been talked about in a number of the provinces. I believe BC was the one that had a referendum on this a few years ago, and the people decided not to change it. The biggest problem is, what do we do different? And until we can come up with a logical, concise approach that we can have to effectively elect members of Parliament in a different manner, it's going to be very hard to come up with an answer to that question. Certainly I feel the frustrations being from the smaller parties especially. But one of the other points that's made in the question has to deal with the Senate and the appointment process of the Senate. I firmly believe that we need that level of government, a level something like the Senate in place, because if we abolish the Senate, and that's been talked about before, we risk putting even more power into the Prime Minister's office, and that's gotten too strong in the last few years anyway. I think we need to look for a way to have an elected Senate or have Senate members that are appointed through a different manner, so maybe that is the opportunity to get the proportional representation through the Senate. Most parties don't have a policy in this. This will not be driven by party policy, because party policy will want to maintain the status quo. That has to be driven from you, the voters, and it has to be driven through individual MPs. And my feeling on it is that our best source of getting some form of proportional representation will be through the Senate.
Thank you. Ms. Robinson?
Hi, thank you very much, Amanda, Zach, and Mark, and whoever else was part of the question. I don't have the answers. As I indicated earlier, I had taken a little bit of political science, and I do believe that this system that we have is the best system available at the moment. It's not something that I agree in all parts with, and I think that it does need some reform, and what that reform is, I'm not sure. And I do believe that somebody out there has the answers, or some people perhaps have the answers, and I look to the younger people who are so disappointed in the way the system works to perhaps come up with some sort of change and make some suggestions. The Senate is an important part in some ways. I believe there's a lot of good committee work done, but I do believe that it tends to be stacked in a way that's not appropriate, and there must be some perhaps electoral system of how do we get a Senate, because there oftentimes does need to be a sober second thought. And again, putting too much power into the Prime Minister's office is not a good thing. So again, I don't have the answers, and I would like to I think that we need to explore it, and I think we need more young people's input into seeing what it is they'd like to see and what they could offer for a solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Blanche?
Hi, Amanda, Zach, and Mark. Proportional representation is a key part of the Green Party policy. We are one of the last parliamentary democracies in the world here in Canada that have what they call a first-past-the-post electoral system. If you want to know where proportional representation is currently, and there are many examples that work very, very well in the world, look where Green Party people have already been elected. Many parts of Europe, including Germany, Australia, and New Zealand. Proportional representation is one of the key things that we need if we want young people to be engaged. If you live in a riding like Cumberland, Colchester, Muscataway Valley, and you look at the history and you see Conservatives have always won, or what was Progressive Conservative, then you probably don't have a lot of hope. We change everything when your vote counts. But I want to point out that we already have proportional representation in one small part in Canada, because for every vote you make, $2 per year goes to the party you vote for. So if you stay home because you don't want to vote for these parties here, and you don't think voting for the Green Party will do you any good, it's not entirely true. Your vote builds our party. The 940,000 votes we got in the last election brings us nearly $2 million a year funding. And that's why our party is growing and building. So it's a very important thing. Well, we will change the proportional representation in Canada. We're a little slow, and we already have it. So remember, when you get the chance to vote Green. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Armstrong.
Well, Amanda Zach, America, thank you for your question. One of the platform pieces that our party has is that we want to reform the Senate. We'd like to see an elected Senate. We'd like to see a Senate that has term limits, and we think that would stop some of the criticism and abuse that's thrown upon the Senate. As someone who's been in Parliament for about a year and a half now, I actually have seen, I've worked on some subcommittees, where I've seen the good work that many of our senators do. And it's not something that I was fully aware of before I became a member of Parliament. And I'm not saying there is undue criticism, because it is unelected, and there is some issues with it. However, many of these senators, because they're there for long terms, take on specific challenges and work on them for many years at a time. They don't have to worry about becoming reelected. They don't have to do what's politically correct and politically expedient. They actually can focus on issues. Senator Fred Dixon here in Toronto has worked diligently, and is ill health himself, on the health care issue, preparing us for negotiations in 2014. So they do some good work. However, our party would like to see them elected, and our party would like to see them with term limits between 8 and 14 years somewhere. We think that would help stop some of the criticism. So that's the position of our party. We want to see term limits. We want to see an elected Senate. But there is some value to the Senate, and it's something that I may not have been as positive about before I actually served as a member of Parliament.
Thank you. Mr. Natchik.
Thank you for the question. The Christian Heritage Party is certainly on side with mixed member proportional representation. If we had that, as was pointed out, the Green Party would have representation in the House of Commons today. So would the Christian Heritage Party have 2 or 3 members of Parliament. And all the voices and all the people across Canada, their voices would be in the House of Commons. The Senate, we believe that the Senate should be elected or appointed by provinces. So let the provinces decide how they want to elect or designate their senators. We believe that the Senate is a very important role in Canada and should remain. You mentioned the Bloc, and it just brought up a red flag. I don't believe the Bloc should be in Parliament as the Bloc. It's not a federal party. It's a provincial party. It was left there. It's an icon from the Maroney protest, and there was both Conservatives and Liberals that marched the floor. It was supposed to be a temporary measure, and there they are trying to split Canada. And getting our tax dollars to help us help them split our nation. So that has to end. It was mentioned about the $2 subsidy that all the political parties get. Well, the Christian Heritage Party doesn't get a dime in political subsidies. We depend on our membership in order to get all our funding. They made the criteria so big that small parties can't meet that criteria, and they've sort of brought up the drawbridge to keep the small parties out. Just thought I'd mention that.
Thank you very much.